Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that one of the world's most influential documents for freedom was created more than 800 years ago? Learn how the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, demanded protection from unfair taxes and the misuse of royal power. Discover that it was written in Latin and contains 63 clauses and principles that include fair trials, protection of property, and limits on taxation, and still shapes governments today.
So if you end up in court today, the rights protecting you from an unfair trial, they weren't just dreamed up by modern human rights lawyers in some, pristine air-conditioned boardroom.
Right, definitely not.
Yeah, they were essentially extorted out of a medieval king at sword point in a damp English meadow 800 years ago.
It sounds like a movie, honestly.
It really does. But today's deep dive is about tracing that exact timeline. Our mission today is to explore how a single world-changing piece of parchment, the Magna Carta, fundamentally shaped the liberties that you rely on every single day.
Yeah, we're basically unpacking how a brutal medieval land dispute became the actual bedrock of modern freedom.
Exactly. And to understand the sheer gravity of that moment, we really have to travel back to a very specific friction point in history.
Right. So the date is June 15th, 1215. We are in the 17th year of the reign of King John of England.
Setting the scene.
Exactly. And the location is this meadow called Runnymede. It sits right between Windsor and Staines. And on this specific day, King John is completely surrounded by heavily armed, very disgruntled noblemen. And he's about to put his royal seal on a document called the Magna Carta Libertatum.
Or the Great Charter of the Liberties.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the date, we have the meadow. You can practically feel the tension in the air. But, how do you force a monarch who genuinely believes he is appointed by God to agree to a piece of earthly parchment?
Right, without him just ripping it up the next day.
Exactly. To grasp the mechanism of this, we really have to look at the power dynamics at play. Because, this wasn't some polite philosophical debate over human rights.
No, not at all. It was a crisis management tactic.
Yeah, to stop a civil war.
Precisely. The Magna Carta was born entirely out of a system that was nearing total collapse. Because in 13th century England, the feudal system was basically the engine of society. The king essentially owned everything.
Right.
And he leased these vast tracts of land to his barons, the higher nobility, and in exchange, they provided him with loyalty, taxes, and knights for his armies.
But King John was just relentlessly abusing that mechanism.
Oh, absolutely. He was fighting these disastrous wars in France, he's losing territory, and just hemorrhaging money.
So to fund these failures, he starts arbitrarily taxing the barons.
Yeah, and aggressively seizing control of their hereditary lands.
Which, the analogy that comes to mind here, it isn't just a bad boss. It's really more like a medieval mafia protection racket.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, like King John is the ultimate don, and the barons are his capos. They manage the territories, they kick up the profits, maintain order.
Yeah.
But suddenly, the Don starts shaking down his own capos.
Yeah.
He's demanding these exorbitant fees just for the privilege of them inheriting their own father's estates.
Which was completely unprecedented.
Right. And if a capo refuses or, just can't pay, the Don just seizes the estate entirely.
Yeah, he just takes it.
So eventually those capos are going to realize, wait, we have the men and the weapons to push back here.
And that dynamic is exactly what triggered the crisis. The system of extortion became so unsustainable that the barons basically had no choice but to unionize.
A heavily armed union.
Very heavily armed. They allied with earls, knights, other hereditary landowners across England, and formed this massive united front.
Wow.
And they actually renounced their oath of fealty to the king, which functionally paralyzed the country.
Because he has no army without them.
Exactly. So King John wasn't suddenly struck by some moral awakening about liberty. He was backed into a corner where his authority was literally evaporating.
So it's a total Mexican standoff in this meadow. The barons are like, sign this list of demands or lose your crown and possibly your head.
Yeah, and he agrees. He signs the treaty, and the barons renew their loyalty. Crisis averted.
For the moment, at least. But let's talk about the document itself, because you often hear the Magna Carta referred to as the first written constitution in European history.
Right.
But wait, really? Because, the Romans had incredibly complex legal codes centuries before this, We have the Code of Hammurabi from antiquity.
Oh, sure.
So what makes this specific piece of parchment functionally different from the laws of the Roman Empire?
That is a crucial distinction because Roman laws and those other ancient codes, they were generally framework dictating how the people must behave
Yeah.
and how the state would punish them if they didn't. They were instructions flowing downward.
From the top down.
Exactly. But the paradigm shift of the Magna Carta, which, by the way, contains 63 specific clauses written in Latin, is that it explicitly dictated how the ruler must behave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, most of those clauses were highly technical, dealing with King John's specific wrongdoings regarding land and debts and feudal dues.
Like the mafia shakedowns.
Right. But embedded within all those technicalities was the revolutionary principle that the king and his government were formally limited by the law.
That's wild. Taking that a step further, though, the logistics of actually enforcing this new paradigm kind of blow my mind.
How so?
Well, it's 1215. There is no printing press.
Oh, yeah. No mass communication at all.
Right. So how do you ensure every angry baron and royal official across the entire country knows that the rules have changed?
You basically rely on an army of exhausted royal scribes.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, they had to painstakingly handwrite multiple copies of this massive document. And they used iron gall ink on dried sheepskin parchment.
Sheepskin? Wow.
Yeah, and then each copy had to be authenticated with the king's great seal, which was this massive chunk of beeswax, and physically transported on horseback to every county in England.
That is incredible.
Yeah, the document was intended to be read aloud in county courts so the law could be known everywhere.
A medieval mass publication.
Basically.
But considering the fragility of sheepskin and beeswax, how many of those original 1,215 copies actually survived the ride through history?
Astonishingly few, actually. Over the centuries, they succumbed to fire, dampness, time.
Makes sense.
Today, only 4 original 1,215 copies still exist in Great Britain.
Just 4.
Just 4. One is at Lincoln Cathedral, one's at Salisbury Cathedral, and 2 are held in the British Museum.
Wow.
They're faded, some are damaged, but all 4 carry the exact same striking declaration at the end, confirming they were given by the king's hand in the meadow called Runnymede on the 15th day of June.
It's staggering that the physical ink remains.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the ideas embedded in that ink are what actually reshaped reality.
Absolutely.
Because the ultimate mechanism of the Magna Carta, the engine driving the whole thing, was the establishment that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law.
Yes.
The 1215 Charter laid down the mandate that if it was God's law, the king was subjugated to it. He couldn't just arbitrarily bend reality to his whim anymore.
Which fundamentally shattered the concept of absolute, unchecked monarchical power.
Right.
But, you know, as monumental as that philosophical victory is, philosophy doesn't feed a starving serf.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't stop a sheriff from seizing your assets. To see the real impact, we have to look at how those 63 clauses actually altered the mechanics of daily life.
The on-the-ground reality.
Exactly. The rights guaranteed over 8 centuries ago set the mechanical foundation for modern justice.
So let's dissect the most impactful ones, because rather than just listing out all 63 grievances, the underlying mechanisms of a few specific clauses show us how the world actually changed.
Okay, let's do it.
Take the guarantee of a fair trial by a jury of peers. We take that completely for granted today.
Oh, absolutely.
But what did a trial actually look like before this clause was enforced?
Well, before this, justice was often arbitrary and incredibly dangerous. I mean, you had trial by ordeal.
Yikes.
Yeah, where an accused person might be forced to hold a red-hot iron or be thrown into water.
Right.
And if you healed cleanly or sank, God had proven you innocent.
And if you festered or floated?
Then you were guilty.
That is terrifying.
Or, alternatively, guilt could simply be decided by the whim of a royal official, just whatever mood they were in. But Clause 39 of the Magna Carta disrupted that entirely. It demanded that a free man could not be imprisoned, stripped of his rights, or exiled, except by the lawful judgment of his equals.
That is a massive operational shift.
Huge. It shifted the burden of proof from divine magic and royal mood swings to actual human evidence evaluated by one's community.
You're replacing superstition with due process.
Exactly.
And another major operational shift was economic, right? The charter established that no taxes could be levied without the consent of the realm's council.
Which, you know, eventually evolves into parliament.
Right. It also mandated compensation for goods seized for national needs. So the government couldn't just roll up to your farm, take your horses for the army, and leave you bankrupt.
Yeah, the mechanism there is the protection of private property from state theft.
Mm-hmm.
The charter also forbade the forced quartering of soldiers in citizens' homes, and it prohibited martial law during peacetime.
Those are huge.
Yeah, these weren't abstract ideals. They were immediate, practical shields against the very tools kings used to terrorize their own people.
But, out of all the clauses regarding knights, castles, taxation, the detail in the text that absolutely floored me was the economic protection of women.
Oh, yes.
Because in 1215, we are talking about a deeply, deeply patriarchal society.
Without a doubt.
Yet there is a specific aggressive protection for widows.
The clauses protecting widows' property rights are honestly some of the most fascinating in the entire document.
Because it really exposes how the king was operating. If a wealthy baron died, his widow was essentially treated as a walking ATM for the crown.
Pretty much.
But the Magna Carta explicitly states that widows who owned property at the time of their husbands' deaths could receive their full inheritances immediately, without paying extortion fees to the king. And critically, they could not be forced to remarry.
And to understand why that was so necessary, you have to realize that the king used forced marriages as a way to control land.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If a widow inherited a massive estate, King John would frequently force her to marry one of his loyal cronies. And by doing so, control of that estate immediately transferred to the new husband, and by extension, back to the king's faction.
That is so manipulative.
The widow was basically just a pawn in a real estate transaction.
So by writing down that a widow cannot be forced into a marriage she doesn't want, the barons weren't just being socially progressive.
No.
They were sealing off a massive loophole the king was using to steal their family's wealth after they died.
Exactly. It protected female agency, yes, but fundamentally it protected the autonomy of the family unit against the state.
Which serves as a perfect pivot point, I think. Because we are looking at rules designed to protect medieval aristocrats in England.
Right.
But the timeline doesn't stop there. How do these very specific pragmatic solutions to a 13th century English crisis cross oceans and centuries to become the blueprint for global democracy?
The evolution is really incredible because the Magna Carta refuses to just stay in 1215.
Yeah.
It becomes like a virus of liberty that keeps infecting subsequent generations. Fast forward to 1689. The English pass the Bill of Rights, which formally lists 13 articles of freedom further restricting the monarchy. And they are looking directly back at the Magna Carta as their legal precedent.
Wow.
And then, less than a century after that, the virus crosses the Atlantic.
Oh, here we go.
By 1776, the American colonists find themselves in an incredibly similar dynamic to those 13th century barons.
Let me guess. They have a king, George III, who is arbitrarily taxing them without their consent.
Yep. Violating their property, ignoring their local authority, all of it.
So to justify their rebellion, the Founding Fathers didn't just invent a new philosophy. They weaponized the Magna Carta.
Exactly. The Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they are all built upon the legal architecture forged at Runnymede.
Built upon almost feels too weak of a phrase. It's direct architectural replication.
Oh, for sure.
Like we talked about Clause 39 earlier, the one requiring a lawful judgment of peers before anyone is imprisoned or stripped of property.
Right, the Due Process Clause.
If you look at the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the phrasing is functionally identical. Nor shall any persons be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
It's basically verbatim.
The American founders literally copy-pasted the mechanism of medieval liberty right into the DNA of a new republic.
And that replication changed the globe because the United States Constitution subsequently became the structural model for countless other emerging democracies worldwide.
Right.
So the principles of the Magna Carta were baked into the governing documents of nations that King John didn't even know existed.
That is just wild to think about.
The ripple effect is so profound that if you visit Runnymede today, you won't just find a British plaque. There is a memorial rotunda standing in that damp meadow erected by the American Bar Association.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they built it to honor the Magna Carta as the symbolic and literal fountainhead of freedom under law.
It's like an unbroken 800-year chain of legal precedent.
It really is.
But, exploring the text also demands we look beyond just the legal mechanics. We've established how the law evolved, But why did it resonate so intensely across disparate cultures and eras?
That's the real question.
Why did American colonists and later civil rights leaders and global democracy advocates all see their own struggles reflected in a fight over medieval scutage taxes?
Well, that brings us to the philosophical culmination of this history. It's really about the concept of human agency.
Okay.
The text and the historical analysis eventually point toward a deeper, almost spiritual necessity for these freedoms. To frame why this concept of agency is so vital, the historical commentary highlights a profound synthesis of this idea from President Brigham Young in the 19th century.
Right, I saw that quote.
Reflecting on the nature of liberty, he basically stated that every man's independence is sacred to him, describing it as a portion of the deity that rules in the heavens.
He's elevating it from a legal right to a fundamental component of the human soul.
Exactly. But the second half of his thought is where it connects directly back to the meadow at Runnymede.
How so?
He argued that no being on earth should be deprived of the free exercise of his agency, provided he does not infringe upon the rights of others, except by good advice and a good example.
Except by good advice and a good example. That phrase is the ultimate rejection of tyranny.
Yeah, it is.
It argues that coercion is an unnatural violation of human existence. You don't control people by seizing their castles, tossing them in dungeons without evidence, or forcing widows into marriages.
Right.
You don't manage a society at the point of a sword. If you want to influence human behavior, you must rely on persuasion, example, and mutual consent.
Which is exactly what Brigham Young is describing. It's the fully realized philosophy that the barons of 1215 were just beginning to blindly grasp for.
Yeah.
They wanted their agency back from a tyrant who relied purely on force.
And that innate human hunger for agency is what propelled those localized demands for fair taxation into universal declarations of human rights.
Exactly. The Magna Carta was the first successful attempt to construct a legal cage around the use of arbitrary force. Without that crucial first step, society wouldn't have developed the vocabulary or the framework to legally protect our sacred independence from those who constantly seek to consolidate power.
It really forces you to reevaluate the architecture of your everyday life.
Yeah.
Taking a step back to look at the sheer scale of this deep dive, it is just astonishing to realize that the greatest safeguard for human liberty in history was kind of a complete accident.
Yeah, an unintended consequence.
A violent protection racket dispute between a desperate, greedy king and his heavily armed capos forced a peace treaty. But in putting their selfish demands down on sheepskin, they accidentally created the mechanism that proved nobody is above the law.
Nobody.
Without that standoff, the modern world simply does not exist.
Which leads directly to a question posed by our exploration of these texts, and it's one we want to hand over to you, the listener.
Yeah.
When you look at the architecture of your own life, what specific rights do you value most?
Is it the absolute security of your home and property?
The guarantee that you can't be detained without transparent evidence?
Or simply the freedom to exercise your agency without government interference?
It's a heavy question.
It really is. And tracing the origins of those rights makes you realize just how fragile they were at the start. But as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly uncomfortable paradox to mull over on your own.
No, this is a good one.
We've spent this time establishing that the Magna Carta was entirely forced into existence by an ultra-wealthy, hereditary elite who were genuinely just trying to protect their own vast states and wealth from a tyrannical king.
Yeah, they weren't exactly thinking about the peasants working their fields.
No, not at all. So isn't it fascinating how the selfish self-preservation of a medieval 1% unintentionally became the universal shield that protects the poorest and most vulnerable citizens today?
It's quite the irony.
From barons hoarding their gold to the basic human rights you rely on right now. Does freedom always trickle down from the top? Next time you assume your rights are just a natural law of gravity, remember that damp English meadow and ask yourself how those protections actually survive the long, bloody ride to you.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.